So obviously, since you've been at the club, Altrincham has had quite a lot of success, a couple of promotions, and now looking towards the top of the National League as well. What would you say are the main attributes of the board at Altrincham that have allowed for consistent improvement?
I'd probably say having calm heads is possibly one of the biggest skill sets I think that we have. Obviously when I came in, Bill had come in just before me. Lawrence not long afterwards. I think people we'd been relegated 2 years in a row. Things weren't obviously in a particularly good situation, but bit by bit, just steady growth. And even there are times when I think we lost the first game after appointing Phil. It was 3-0, and you're thinking, okay, obviously fans are not happy. I say fans, there weren't many fans coming to games at that stage. There weren't many at all. So um, it's just having the kind of, I guess, conviction in the decisions that you're making. Staying calm when negative things happen, which inevitably happens at football clubs. Every football club, in some shape or form, even if great things are happening, you're having promotions and so on, and you're winning games, things still happen, and we've seen that over the time that we've been at the club. Whether it's obviously we've had issues with the stadium, COVID, transitioning to full time, and little hiccups all along the way. But how you respond to those bits is probably, I'd say, the biggest asset that we've had, and how people keep cool.
Sort of picked up on it a little bit there, but I know Stockport County they've got promoted a few years ago. They're now top
Mm.
of the League Two. They they've spoken quite openly about having a 7-year plan about going up the league. Is that something that you apply at Altrincham in a long term plan like that, or is it more about focusing on the issues right in front of you rather than the future?
I think we're in the third plan during my time at the club, and we've got a strategy day coming up shortly, which will address like the next 5 years. Um, Listen, Stockport's a different kind of kettle of fish because they've got like big backers and big investment that's gone into the club, and they've been very bold. And there's a lot about Stockport that I really admire. Um, so they've got that bold ambition to get the promotions to be a championship club within 7 years, and fair play to them for that. And they won't be far away from it. I wouldn't have thought. A lot of the things that they do, a lot of the processes, they get right more things than they get wrong, and fair play to them for that. From our perspective, I think it's a bit more of it's kind of steady, sensible, and kind of educated growth. Really, we don't make I'd like a bit more planning to go into things at times, and to have a bit more thought and behind some of the things. But in general, a lot of that does happen. There is really good discussion on a lot of different points. And everything that we do, there's very, very little that is knee jerk. We do have obviously the crisis management part, when obviously we had issues with parts of the stadium and so forth. But the vast majority of things is all built around, obviously people been around for a period of time, the stability that's been at the club, whether that's the manager and the management team, whether that's players, whether that's the board, whether that's volunteers who've been around for decades, some of them. That's a big part of it. But the way that we've tried, and when I think about the things I do on the football side, that steady growth is basically what's kind of sustained us and enabled us just to develop year on year, which is what we're trying to do all the time.
Picked up on it a little bit there as well. Phil Parkinson's coming into his seventh season now. How important is it for a club trying to grow to have a manager with his potential and willing to stay for as long as he has done?
Yeah, it's huge, and there's loads of facets around that. You keep changing managers, you'll inevitably be changing players. I'm very much around the style of a manager, how they play, what they're looking for in players. I could still find another manager who would play a 4-2-3-1 typically, but there might be certain, whether it's personality traits, whether it's certain characteristics of certain players, the top man, he wants a bigger guy, and they will always have differences of opinion and want different players, and turnover of players inevitably costs you money. So from that perspective, that's a huge one, and that kind of stability. Ultimately, what you're trying to do at a football club, and this is on and off the pitch, is building a kind of a culture at the club everyone can identify with. And that is the same, and that's the same whether it is somebody, a steward, or whether that's a player, essentially. And obviously, having somebody over that period of time does help you install something which wasn't existing. The previous season, I think it was 4 different managers during that season. We've seen it at bigger clubs, more high-profile clubs who've go through manager after manager after manager. Very difficult to succeed that way, certainly longer term, and especially when you count every single penny, and on the financial side you keep things really tight and sweat everything you can. Having that bit that's stable is really important.
It was quite a big chunk of investment this summer, and compared to maybe the Premier League clubs, it might not seem that significant. But how much does that money impact your ambitions, and how much can it help in a year, pretty much?
Well, first, it's probably a kind of 2 to 3 year. I mean, it all depends on obviously what the terms are, or when investment comes in, and so on. But we essentially looked at it as an opportunity to give us a bit more breathing space when it comes to decision making. And you think about when we're negotiating with players and agents, and we're talking about lengths of contracts, and a very, very talented number 10 who's only 22 years old. Having him contracted for a couple of years is huge for us. Without the investment, I couldn't be committing to the length of some contracts. And at that point, you risk losing your better players, especially when you're having success, but you risk losing your better players for under market value or for nothing. And that then starts hampering your growth, essentially, what we've obviously done reasonably well on in recent years. So the investments helped give us that platform for, I'd probably say, 2 seasons of lifting everything to a degree. And when I say everything, I mean it's not just football. It's paid staff. It will be bits around the stadium, the fan zone, and so on. It helps us improve all those things. But it probably gives us that kind of runway for, say, a couple of years. And obviously, during that time, we need to be getting better results on the pitch, which I like to think has happened this season, and also improving things off it. And the big scalable point around that, and all the things that we're kind of trying to do, is grow the attendances ultimately. There's loads of great work that goes on in the community. There's, a good brand of football on the pitch. We're trying to improve the fan zone and the experience around a match day, but it's all with the aim of improving the attendance, because that's the one scalable feature that we've got at the club to increase the revenues.
This season, you just talked about it then, the results probably exceeded expectations of most. After 3 years in the league, probably lower mid-table, what would you say has been the biggest factor to be able to look up towards the table and push for playoffs?
I think so. Transitioning to full time 18 months ago was a major part of that. We knew that we would always have probably a slightly younger squad that first year, because of where we were budget wise. And at that point, it was a kind of bottom 6 budget, so we knew that we had to be really, really clever with how we use the low market really well, and really maximise the budget that we had. But with the younger players that we had contracted, we knew that we'd have to go through some of those times of, okay, there's going to be some rocky periods within this. But ultimately, as we've always done, and Phil and Neil do a great job at this, is, sticking with them, developing them, improving them, and educating them, essentially. And you can see it this season, where there's so many parts of the messaging that goes into lads. Being full-time, you have more time with them. It's year 2 for a number of them. It's all clicking, essentially. And you look at most of the squad, I would say, this season, you'd say all of them are improving all the time. And that's the biggest positive, I think, and that's ultimately it's a time thing, and obviously you're always limited by what your budget is and so forth. Whether your budget's X, Y, or Z, everyone always wants more, but we've done a pretty good job at that with the idea of just growth of the players as people, essentially, and I think that's why it's paid dividends this year.
Um, this year, there's the chance of playoffs. Only a few games ago, people were looking even up the table to second or third, even.
Yeah.
If the team do manage to get to playoffs and go up, how would that affect the club rather it might as more than just league status?
Listen, I mean, I think everyone's certainly say the board and a lot of volunteers. I mean, this is I joined just before we appointed Phil and Neil. The biggest driver for all of us is getting into the league and making history, essentially. So everything that we do, we're always striving to just be the best that we can, keep driving things forward, albeit sensibly. It would be huge for us. There would be a lot of work. I recognise that, and that's on the football side, but that's every side, whether it's staff, resources, stadium. There's all kinds of things that would come into play, but it'd be a great challenge to have. And it's one that still motivates everybody, even though we realise that the work would start it started already. We always plan for the potentials just so it doesn't catch you out, essentially.
Speaking on that, Torquay United a few years ago, they finished second, didn't manage to go up, and now they're struggling in the National League South. If it doesn't go to plan and you don't manage to get promotion this season, how does that negatively affect the club? Or are you, like you say, have you already got plans in place to build on it and then try and go again next year?
Yeah, I just read an article about Torquay this morning, and I think there's obviously a lot more going on at that club than just results on the pitch. I think from our perspective, disappointment is always tough to kind of handle, and that's the same for everybody, whether it's a player, a manager, a fan, a board member, a volunteer. My kids at the local school. We lost to Halifax in heartbreaking fashion in the semi-final. One click from Wembley, but that's football. Those things happen, and the bit that I think we have at this club is just that kind of inner strength that says, yeah, no, these are the things that you get dealt with. You brush them off, and I'm very much whether it's a win, draw, or a loss, every single week I'm just on to the next game. Might have a little sulk for a period of time, but that will be that won't go for too long. It's you pick yourselves up and you crack on for the next one. I think the very fact we haven't got the big storied league history, we don't have a divine right to be there, and we've got to earn that, and it's the hardest league to get out of. So from our perspective, it's we just keep pushing, keep improving things, and just keep that relentless ambition really to get there.
Related, I'm just curious. Last season there was Wrexham and Notts County, as well as Chesterfield, all in the league. This year, Chesterfield are running away with it.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the National League's at a stage now where the quality in the league is enough to warrant another promotion spot? I know there's quite a big debate going on about it.
The shout for that has never been any kind of louder, I think, in the last couple of years. The year before, Stockport and Wrexham were rampant. Then obviously we had Wrexham and Notts County. Chesterfield, superb this season. I think the overall strength of the division is higher. I think the top teams are probably a little bit weaker than the last couple of years. But I do think that the top 6, 8 teams in this division would compete very well in League Two, especially compared to say the bottom third of that division. So no, from my perspective, the 3 up, 3 down just feels like a natural thing and a right thing. And to be honest, they always refer to it as Turkeys and won't vote for Christmas and so on. Those teams in League Two. Well, actually, when they go down, it's only then that they realise how painful it is down here and how impossible it is to. It's not impossible, but how difficult it is to get promoted. So all of those teams that have gone through it, Wrexham were down here for 14, 15 seasons. A big club before Ryan and Rob got involved, and there's loads more clubs like that are big. You know, you look at the National League North and South, there's big clubs that have been in the Championship recently, like Scunthorpe and Yeovil. It's the 3 up, 3 down has to happen in my mind.
Finally, from me, you sort of talked about it already, but as a club who's never made it into the league, with a chance to go up here or in the near future, how much would it mean to you individually as someone who's put in place things that can happen on the pitch? How much would it mean to you if you were one of the people who led them to football league for the first?
Yeah, it would be huge. It'd be huge for everybody involved at this moment in time, and in recent years that have kind of contributed to getting where we are. None of this just happens overnight. If you've got the situation where huge amounts of money are thrown for a season and then you got everything right and you got promoted, fair enough. But this hasn't just happened overnight here. This has been a really long, well thought out kind of approach to how we tackle this club. And that happens all the time, and we're very good at kind of just reviewing things, and you don't get everything right, but I'd like to think we'll get more things right than not on and off the pitch. So no, I think everybody who's involved right now will be super proud of it, but it's just the same as having a big disappointment once it's done. I might look on it when in years to come and have huge pride over it, but it would just be probably celebrate that night and get to work the next morning.
Brilliant.
Thank you.